Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of Endo Coffee, the cycle of webinars related to endodontic problems created and brought to you by Endostar. It is my pleasure to meet with you today, as I said, on the second edition of Endo Coffee webinar, which is a part of a cycle which is with us from the very beginning of the pandemic. It was always a chance for us to meet for a short break during our daily routine and talk about some endodontic related problems. Today, we will talk about safety in endodontics, safety in our procedures during pandemic, about Ramadan. Now I will switch to the presentation, and well, I hope you will like it, and so that we can discuss it later on, because discussion is what this Endo Coffee is about. So let's begin. Okay, before we move to the main course of today's meeting, I'd like to shortly introduce myself. Well, first of all, I'm broadcasting from Łódź, which is a middle-sized post-industrial town located just in the middle of Poland, around 100 kilometers from capital of Poland, from Warsaw, from Endostar headquarters as well. I sincerely invite you to Łódź, which is considered one of the coolest European cities nobody ever heard of. So if you are around in Poland after this ill times go into oblivion, let me know. I will be happy, very happy to show you around, because this is really a beautiful city with lots of beautiful townhouses, palaces, with perfect restaurants, street art, and various attractions. So maybe sometime we'll meet here in Łódź. Of course, I'm a dentist. I've been practicing microscopic dentistry for almost 15 years now. And well, as a matter of fact, I just finished my daily work at the office, and I'm here with you. But apart from being a dentist, I'm also a teacher, an academic teacher, and I work in the Medical University of Łódź, at the Department of Endodontics. And well, I'm teaching students this beautiful part of our job. And well, as a part of endodontic department, I'm very proud, because we are the partner of Penn Dental School, run by Professor Kim. So this is very nobilitating thing. So this is my alma mater. And now let's move on to the safety. Okay, let's move on to the safety in endodontics. We will run through different aspects of safety. So let's first start with the patient. Okay, this is something new, something which we didn't do earlier. Of course, we did it before oral surgery. Rinsing patient's mouth for the sake of the better healing. But now recommendations are that the patient, before being admitted to the clinic, to be to undergo anything on the dental chair should rinse his mouth or gargle mouth and throat with different antiseptics. We use, at my dental office, we use hydrogen peroxide. So this is just a small amount of it, and the patient rinses for about 30 seconds. And then the amount of pathogens in his oral cavity, throat, and saliva is much lower. Of course, you can use iodopovidone or chlorhexidine as well. However, with chlorhexidine, it is not so obvious. So some people tell that chlorhexidine is not as efficient as others antiseptics. So, well, I believe hydrogen peroxide is the easiest thing, works well. So this is just the beginning. Of course, all the patients who are being admitted at our office are symptom-free. So we monitor the temperature level, ask about their general health, if there are any symptoms of airways infection, of course, if they tell us, right? But for sure, we monitor temperature and we start with rinsing. So that's the first thing. Another issue I would like to tell you about, and I think it's it is very interesting, is creation of aerosol during our procedures. Of course, we are using rotary instruments which run at high speed, we need water cooling. And we use it, of course, every day. But as a matter of fact, they can create different amount of aerosol. And the choices between air turbine and fast speed handpiece. This is the choice I made several years ago, not because of aerosol created, but back then, but because when I started to work with the magnification, with the microscope, I found air turbine as an inappropriate device which I cannot control as I would like to, device which is not that precise I would like it to be. So the device which runs at 300,000 RPMs is very difficult to control. And as a matter of fact, it creates lots of aerosol around it. So using fast speed contra angle, in my opinion, and not only because of COVID pandemic, not only because of aerosol, but also because of it, it's much better choice. So maybe pandemic, I think, well, that pandemic is a time when we can think about some aspects of our work and maybe change something. So maybe this is something to change about. So get rid of air turbines, which do more harm than good, and switch to fast contra angles. All right, and finally we get to the most obvious thing when we talk about safety in endodontics. Let's move on to the rubber dam. And well, I must tell you that I don't get it. I totally don't get it why rubber dam, in spite of its simplicity and what he does for us, didn't get to the mainstream of dentistry. It's now 2020, right? And I'm not sure how it is in your countries, but here in Poland, the majority of dentists do not use rubber dam at all. And we are talking, of course, about endodontics, but at all, right? They usually know what rubber dam is, right? Who wouldn't, right? Since its invention was back in 19th century. And funny thing, I found a textbook of operative dentistry, which was, I think, dated back in the beginning of 20th century, I think 1915. And you know what? There's a chapter 11, chapter 9, sorry. And back then, so more than 100 years ago, they already knew it, that since 1864, so the invention of rubber dam, nothing has been found to equal rubber dam for excluding the saliva during lengthy and intricate operations. They knew it 100 years ago, and unfortunately, most of dentists do not know it till now. So this is one of the biggest mysteries of dentistry for me. However, rubber dam didn't get through, and it's a pity, because this is just a perfect solution for not only for pandemic, but of course it makes our work much safer, but for our everyday work, right? So this is so obvious, this is so beautiful, simple, and I don't know why our colleagues do not get it. Well, first of all, it creates a barrier between patient and operator and assistant. So it, of course, it doesn't eliminate, but it reduces the risk of cross-infection between patient and operator. And this is something for pandemic time, right? Or maybe this is something which will get to those who are skeptical about rubber dam, maybe to try it during pandemic, because work in the rubber dam is much safer than work without. And of course, it provides optimal treatment conditions because it retracts soft tissues, it retracts cheeks and tongue, and the saliva, of course, doesn't get into our operative field. So our comfort of work is much higher, right? And but this is not only about us, right? For us, of course, it's much easier to work with the rubber dam. But it's also comfort for the patient, because this barrier causes the teeth which are undergoing our dental procedures not to be felt by the patient. I sometimes talk with patients about what they feel, about their feelings and ideas about rubber dam. And of course, some of them hate it. But most of them really appreciate it, and they think that, hey, because we are using anesthesia, right? So they don't feel any pain, and they have a feeling that something is done outside of their body, not to them, but to something outside of them, right? So it's really, I think it creates a higher comfort for patient as well. And it makes our treatment much faster because we don't have to fight with the patient. We just fight with the tooth, right? And that's enough in most of the cases. I don't know how it is in your countries, once more, but here in Poland, in Europe, we are obliged theoretically to use rubber dam. So this is our duty during endodontic treatment, to do this treatment in proper isolation. So both European Society of Endodontology and as well American Association of Endodontists, they oblige us to use rubber dam during endodontic treatment. So this is our duty to do so, right? And this is well, something basic, totally basic, right? This is a rubber dam kit, so everything is just inside. Everything you need is in there. Of course, we have dam. Let me turn on the pointer. Of course, we have a dam. We have a puncher. We have forceps, and of course clamps, template, which helps us in deciding where we should make a hole in the dam, and a widget-like silicone floss, which helps to stabilize the teeth. So everything is in this kit, and when we have it just at the reach of the hand, it's much more tempting to use, maybe, because I think when I talk with some dentists who do not use rubber dam, they just are afraid because it seems for them very complex. There are thousands of different clamps and they don't know which clamp to use. And of course, such kits, as I show you, make it a little bit simpler, because in this kit we have 5 clamps, right? 1 clamp for incisor and canines. We have 2 clamps for premolars, bigger and smaller. And we have clamps for molars. These are clamps for upper and lower molars, which, well, honestly, I don't like these. I will show you just in this third slide, because I believe it can be done even easier. Okay, let's see. I believe we can do it in most of the cases. We can put on the rubber dam and provide perfect conditions for our treatment and perfectly safe conditions for our treatment. Having only 3 clamps in our drawer, 1 for molars, or maybe 2 different, because some of molars are bigger, some smaller, so maybe 2 for molars, 1 for premolars and 1 for the smaller teeth, so for incisors and canines. So that's it, 3 clamps. So it doesn't get so complex now, right? Does it? And of course, if we look at the clamps, we can generally divide them into 2 groups: wingless and winged clamps. Well, and it's a matter of choice. The more I work with the rubber dam, the more I like the wingless clamps. However, those with the wings can be used as well. However, I find the wingless clamps much more versatile. So they, in my opinion, in my hands, maybe not, maybe in others' hands they won't, but in my hands, they can do much more than the clamps with the wings. And but this is a matter of choice, right? Now, a few aspects of rubber dam. I don't want to get you bored with talking about rubber dam basics, because I believe it's pretty much well covered all around books and internet, and on the YouTube you will find tons of movies about putting on the rubber dam. But I would like to concentrate on some details, maybe which I think are quite interesting. So first thing is the color of the rubber dam. They usually come in blue or green, sometimes purple, sometimes black. And I believe that blue is the perfect color of the rubber dam. Why? Because as you look at the color wheel here in the center, you will see that blue is just on the opposite side of yellow and orange. And in the color wheel, the colors which are on the opposite sides give the best contrast. So when we have teeth which are yellow and orange, more or less in color, they are the best visible on the background, which is blue. So that's why I usually use blue rubber dams. Of course, black rubber dams are very stylish, right? But blue, I believe, is enough, and it's the best choice. Another thing is the material of the rubber dam. Most of the rubber dams are made out of latex. It can be artificial or natural, and there is a difference, of course, but for endodontic reasons, absolutely it doesn't matter if it's natural or not. But there is also a possibility to use rubber dam which is latex free, so made out of silicone, for those who are allergic to latex, because some of the patients can be. Okay, so we have a choice. And at this slide, I would like to focus on also on the thickness on the rubber dam, because I very often hear that the thickness doesn't change anything. It doesn't matter in endodontics, and any rubber dam will be good. Well, and I don't agree with it. I think the thicker the better. Of course, the thicker, the more difficult to put on. So the medium thickness is usually enough, but absolutely not thin. Because you must remember one very basic thing about rubber dam. It is the dam itself which isolates. It's not the clamp, it's not the floss, it's not the widget, it's just the gum, and the thicker the gum, the better the sealing, right? So thickness in this situation makes difference. Of course, sometimes we may use liquid rubber dam in situations when isolation is very difficult and we cannot get it right, okay? But for me, liquid rubber dam is usually a situation when I must admit that I failed to isolate with the rubber only. And well, as I said, we won't talk about methods of putting on the rubber dam, because believe me, when you enter rubber dam placement in YouTube, you will get hundred thousands of results. Okay, so what is important is not the method of placement, is the result. Okay, so it doesn't matter how we do it, because we may choose different methods. It's of course related to the clamp we are using, the tooth we are putting the clamp on, but the outcome should be one. So we should finish with clean operative field. So this is our goal, and no matter how we do it, we must finish with the clear operative field. And some details which will help us with it. So the most important thing is the inversion of the gum. So usually when we put the rubber dam on the tooth, it will be like this on the picture on the right. And as you look closely, the dam which lies on the neck of the tooth creates a valve. So if the saliva gathers underneath, it will just flow out of it. the valve will open. Okay, so in order to avoid it, we must invert the rubber dam, right? Just like this. And this is how it should look like. Of course, sometimes we make mistakes when we put on the rubber dam, and the most common mistake, I think, is the leakage on the interproximal surface. Okay, why is there leakage? Because the gum doesn't go through the contact point, just like in this slide. Here, everything is perfect, and here, as you see, the gum is even inverted. But when we go on the distal, we see that here the gum is not inverted, and it is not inverted. Why? Because it got stuck at this contact point. So it is very crucial to get the gum through the contact points on the interproximal areas. On the medial, it is usually easier because there is no clamp bow, which makes it more difficult. But in order to get rid of this leakage, we have to either pull the gum to the distal, right? And when it stretches, it may just go itself through the contact point, or we use floss, but we must use floss underneath the clamp. Okay? So this is one of the most common errors while we put on the rubber dam. Another error, usually made by those who start their journey with the rubber dam, and when they use the winged clamps, the method of putting the rubber dam requires firstly to put the dam on the wings of the clamp. And it is very often that the operator forgets to get the rubber from the clamp. And if he remembered that it is the rubber that provides the sealing, then he would do it, but he forgot about it. And he just left it unsealed. So there is gonna be a massive leakage, right? Because here underneath is just the tongue, okay, and a lot of saliva. So be very careful and remember to get the rubber, get the dam from the wings if you use the winged clamps. This is very important detail. And finally, I believe a trick which I find extremely helpful during placing the rubber dam and working with the rubber dam, and especially working with water cooling, is to create pockets, just like here. I usually use metal frames. Why? Because I can create something like this using metal frame and the gum. So I stretch the gum from this part and I take it on the upper part of the frame. That is how I create the pocket where the water from the handpiece, which is not suctioned by the assistant, won't fall over the patient and on the floor. So I think this little detail, one small detail, is quite interesting one. Okay, and this was the rubber dam, and now I'd like to talk about maybe a workflow with the rubber dam in it, because the easiest way of putting on the rubber dam is a single tooth isolation. So one hole, one tooth, one clamp, that's it, right? It is extremely fast, and it is of course sufficient for root canal treatment, but I will show you later on, maybe we could choose something different, because in this situation, we have very confined working space. and we may have difficulties in positioning instruments. And what's most important, we have no access to the interproximal surfaces. So we may not be able to treat or rebuild the tooth, treat the caries on the interproximal surface, which is the most common situation, right? So I believe that multiple teeth isolation is maybe more time consuming, but it gives us a lot, really a lot of advantages, because it is suitable for almost all the procedures. And what's important, since we have access to all the surfaces of the tooth, we can start with such an isolation just in the very beginning of the visit. And the rubber dam is with us throughout the whole visit. That I find very, very important. And now I'd like to show you very safe, I believe, very safe approach to the workflow with the rubber dam in it. This is the initial situation. This is the tooth 2-6, so the first left upper molar, which was to be treated endodontically. This was supposed to be re-endo because of periapical inflammation. And so this is initial situation. This is what the patient comes with, okay? And of course, we may start the treatment straight away through putting on the rubber dam on a single tooth, trepanate the tooth, leaving this restoration on the mesial side. However, most of the times, these restorations will leak or they may fall out later on. So I think the better solution is to put on the rubber dam properly, then start the treatment. So trepanate the tooth, as you see. The primary endodontic treatment wasn't perfectly done, even seen by what's inside of the pulp chamber. But this is not the end, right? We are removing the whole restoration. And on this slide, you see the whole cavity, the pulp chamber, everything is much, much, much clearer. I always, after preparing the cavity, I always sandblast it. And this is the image after sandblasting. This is the matrix, and of course, this is starting point. And from now on, we may start our endodontic treatment. Everything done in rubber dam, everything done perfectly safe, both for the patient and us. We didn't create any aerosol which is mixed with saliva, with patient saliva. So more or less, we are quite safe. And in my opinion, such a workflow works very well. So we can start everything with the rubber dam and finish everything, even in a single visit, with a rubber dam. So that's great. It's a great idea. Okay, and finally, two more aspects about safety. This one absolutely not related to COVID pandemic, but related to endodontics. So two aspects of safety. One is the glide path, which is absolutely absolutely basic aspect, but extremely helpful. If we create such a glide path, our treatment is much safer and much more predictable. So we can create it, of course, with our hand files, but what I love about glide path files is that they are so easily used. Here you have a glide path file by Endostar, and of course hand files which can be used instead of it. Usually when I have problems with getting into the canal, and in most of the cases the problematic canals are, for instance, MB2 canals in upper molars. So even if I cannot get with the cPilot or cPilot-like file, I'm fairly sure I can get inside with the rotary file like this. And another aspect about safety is the motion of the file. Once more, rotary motion is extremely efficient, but it's not the safest one. On the other hand, reciprocating movement is extremely safe, but not that efficient. So if we combine both these movements, so we use hybrid motion, we get both safety and the efficiency. And I'd like to show you now the short movie about the different use of rotating motions during endodontic treatment. This was the lower molar. I hate lower molars because getting to the mesial canals is usually very tough, especially when the patient doesn't open mouth very wide. And here you see we start with the E3 Azure. This is a 26% taper file. And this is the file I love in this system. This is the file which I use in the beginning, and it does the most of the work. As you see, we are going to look only at the preparation of the mesial canals. The distal was already done, and it wasn't a problem. And the second file, here you see the problem of getting to the mesial root. And if you bend the file, and of course, if you are using heat-treated files like Azure, you will be able to bend them. You see that this file is used not in the rotary motion. It's used in the reciprocating motion. I find this motion much more precise. So usually when I'm finishing my preparation, I'm finishing with this motion, not with the rotary motion. Okay. So this was one mesial canal. The second one was much easier and faster to treat. You see, it's fairly easy. You will see in the next slide why it was so. So working with hybrid motion and working with very well prepared glide path and such active working file like Azure files makes our treatment very predictable and safe. So of course, flushing with sodium hypochlorite, one of the most important things. And let's go back to the final slide, right? Now you see why the second canal was so easily to be treated, right? Because it was much shorter. This was Bertucci type 2 classification. So the two canals in the coronal part joined together in apical third. And that's it. These mesial canals were treated only using these two files. So 20.6, 35.4, and this was the end of the preparation. Number file, finishing file was used in the reciprocating movement, and 20.6 was used in mostly rotary movement, but since it was used a hybrid motion, hand-based, so it adapted to the torque, and it switched to the reciprocating movement when the torque was too big. Okay, thank you very much for sipping this short coffee with me. I hope you will have some questions. Let me switch to the camera once again, and I check, because today we had some problems in Eastern Europe with Facebook, and that's why our communication is a little bit more difficult. Okay, we have one question only. Oh, one is good enough. Okay, the question is, can the dental dam clamp cause breakage of the tooth? I heard so, but it never happened to me. Throughout 15 years of working, I never broke a tooth with a clamp. This is a matter of proper fitting of a clamp. So remember that the clamp shouldn't be too active on the tooth. So the size of the clamp matters, and the bigger the tooth, the bigger the clamp should be. However, if it happens, it happens usually because the tooth structure was compromised. So in most of the cases, the tooth was too destroyed in the cervical area. But as I said, it never happened to me, and I hope it will never happen. So don't worry about it, okay? These are, of course, some stories which are being told, but from my perspective, from my experience, it's not a problem at all. Oh, great. Another question. Dental dam is perfect during endodontic treatment, but in which prosthetic cases is good to use it too? As a matter of fact, of course, if we talk about classical prosthetics, so in most of the cases with prosthetic crowns, classical crowns, we won't be able to use rubber dam easily because our margin of preparation is below the gum level. However, in most of the adhesive related prosthetics, rubber dam is absolutely must have. So in all the onlay, overlay, inlay procedures, I do everything in rubber dam. You may have seen the slide with the multiple teeth isolation, and that was the slide with the cementation of the overlay. So absolutely, even if we perform crowns which we later on cement adhesively, so Emax crowns or composite crowns, absolutely, we usually in these situations, we may not need to enter the margin of preparation so deep gingivally under gingiva. So we may put the rubber dam, and we should put the rubber dam during the cementation procedure. So absolutely, for prosthetics, rubber dam is also possible, and I also use it. So conservative dentistry, prosthetics, endodontics, of course, and even surgery. Believe me, you can use a split dam technique, and I've used it in patients with very difficult to control tongue and cheeks. If there is a matter of extraction of lower tooth, we can create operative field using split dam, rubber dam, and have much better access and better visibility to the operative field. So even in surgery as well. Okay, so unfortunately, no more questions. I hope you liked it. I hope you got some fresh ideas from this webinar, and take care through these pandemic times. See you around.